Yay, a microphone. This is my favourite place to be, on stage at a WordCamp. I'm a bit of a junkie. This is my 5th one this year. And none of them have been where I live. So just a little bit about me. When my slides finally open. My business is House Digital. We're a little boutique web agency. We build websites. We're pretty standard as far as web agencies go. We do try and specialize a bit in things like integrations and automations and customizations. So we do lots of quirky little projects that other people maybe aren't necessarily willing to tackle. So this is me. I think it's a pretty accurate likeness, especially if you see me with my glasses on. And I am really passionate about making it to as many WordCamps as possible, and I'm running WordCamp Perth next year. I really like anything techie, and one of the things I love about WordPress is that it's allowed me to completely pivot and switch jobs. I'm also a massive cat fan, so anyone that's like a cat person, come hit me up later. We can talk cats. And obviously like traveling, because I do that all the time. I just came back from Auckland a couple of weeks ago, speaking at the WordCamp there. So this is me, but I think a better person to introduce for this talk is actually this guy right here, who is my nerdier half. This is my partner Ross, both in business and life, and Ross runs DevHouse, and DevHouse builds custom web applications and sort of complex websites for enterprise and corporate clients. So we run our two businesses next to each other, and the reason why I'm introducing Ross today is because Ross was pretty integral to this project. It was actually his team that did most of it, but he hates public speaking, so I'm on stage instead. So this project that I'm going to talk about today was a crossover project between one of Ross's clients, Comfort Style Furniture, who I'm going to talk a little bit about, and how we implemented a headless WordPress blog for them on a completely non-WordPress website. And you might ask, why would you do that? Why not just redo the website in WordPress, right? Because WordPress can do anything. Well, like WordPress can do anything, but maybe shouldn't. So there was a bunch of reasons, and I'm going to go over to my notes here just a little bit. Hopefully I'm not in the light for our live stream person here. But Comfort Style Furniture, they're a WA-based supplier of furniture and bedding. They have about 25 stores all around WA, and they've been a client of ours for quite a long time. They sell online as well as in physical stores, and they wanted to start implementing a content marketing strategy, so they needed a blog, right? So pretty obvious so far. The thing that made this a little bit complicated is that their website and their entire business runs via a custom ERP system that has been built for them over a long span of time. And that system definitely does not use WordPress. It was basically just the system that has been developed for them over the last 15 years. It just wasn't an option to move away from it because it basically runs their entire business. So it's the thing that gives them a bit of an edge. So they pretty much needed just a simple sort of overview archive page for their blog, and then they also wanted like a header banner to show a featured blog, and they also wanted to be able to show 3 spotlighted blogs on their homepage. The kicker was that they really didn't like the custom WYSIWYG editor, the standard WYSIWYG editor. So we all remember back to the classic editor, and I know there's probably like half of you that still use the classic editor because you don't like Gutenberg, and I get it. It was an unpopular decision to move it into core so quickly, but from the perspective of someone who does a ton of training with people on WordPress, the Gutenberg editor has been really popular with my clients. So maybe not popular with developers just yet, but the usability of it and the user experience of it has been really pleasant. And so when they said we want a blog, the thing that to them was most important was having a really nice user experience on the back end, which meant we had to look outside of the WYSIWYG editor. So we were like, cool, we can implement Gutenberg. not in WordPress. That's been done before. We were inspired. There's Laravel, which took the Gutenberg editor and attempted to sort of package it as an easy-to-use implementation for Laravel. For those of you that have used Laravel before. It's on GitHub. You can check it out. It's on van-ons/Laraberg. There's Gutenberg for Drupal, which has successfully implemented Gutenberg in the Drupal content management system. Who uses Drupal, right? We're here for WordPress. So we were a little naive. Like, I won't lie, we were a little naive, and we were like, yeah, we could totally do this. We can definitely do this. So we gave it a good crack, and then we realized the overhead involved with having so many endpoints for Gutenberg to communicate with was going to be like really difficult. We also had issues with the image blocks. So this was a fairly critical requirement. Obviously, if you're doing a content marketing strategy and you're selling furniture, you want to be able to put pictures of lounges up. So implementing the image block with a team that didn't really do React ended up just being a little bit overwhelming. So we kind of looked like this. And we were like, all right, what are we going to do, guys? Because we promised this to the customer. We were like, yes, we're going to give you this blog, and it's going to be really nice to use on the back end. And they really liked Gutenberg, and they were really excited about having this block editor. So we kind of had gone back to the drawing board, and we weren't really sure at this point what we were going to do. And then we went to WordCamp Brisbane. And here's the perks of going to so many WordCamps is you get to hear about lots of cool stuff that other people are doing. And in particular, there was a really interesting talk. So big shout out to this guy, Philip Johnson, who did a talk on WordPress for Gatsby.js for the project Splendor in the Grass. So you guys know Splendor in the Grass? Yeah? Big music festival. So what happens when the lineup is announced for a big music festival? They get smashed with people trying to buy tickets, right? So they used Headless WordPress for this so that they could decouple the back end and the front end, and it meant that, first of all, the security was a little bit better than what you would get with a standard WordPress install, because they have separation between the front end and the back end. And secondly, it meant that it could handle all of the hits at one time, because they could host it somewhere that was a little bit more suitable for that. So this example obviously is using Gatsby.js. We weren't using React for the front end. We weren't using even JavaScript really for the front end of the website. And while the Comfort Style website was very high in, or is very high in volume, they get a lot of traffic. It's fairly consistent traffic. So it's not flooding it at one particular time. It's just kind of always going through. So the thing that we took away from this actually was that they were using Headless WordPress to deliver content. So they were using a WordPress install to deliver content somewhere else. And we were like, that's interesting. We hadn't thought of that option. So then we were like, I wonder how hard Headless WordPress actually is. And it turns out accessing content from the WordPress API is like super easy. Like super easy. And I think the problem that we had here was that our initial assumption was that there was a lot of authentication and that sort of thing to have to go through to be able to access it. But it turns out that there's not, because pretty much everything's just public. So you can publicly access that API once you've turned it on. And all that API data is public anyway. It's all just stuff that's going to be in the blog. So it wasn't really a risk at all. We were like, cool, we could do this. And we started to, feel a little bit more positive about the direction of this project. But then we were like, okay, well, there's a few things that we haven't quite figured out how to do yet. And I have to apologize because I did preload my fonts on here, but they haven't come through. So pretend that this is a nice script font and not giant block text, okay? So, so first of all, we were like, how do we do these feature posts that they want on the homepage and all that kind of thing? The second thing was, how do we get the banners there? And we wanted to do those. We wanted to pull in those banners using ACF, and it turns out that ACF fields aren't actually visible as standard in the API. So that was another issue that we ran into. And then we were like, the Comfort Style website gets a lot of traffic, as I mentioned, and so it uses a CDN. We use Cloudflare for it. And we wanted to be able to deliver the images through the CDN, but they were just pulling, because they were coming from the API, they were just pulling directly from the WordPress install, which wasn't ideal because obviously it means it's loading slower. But lastly, it also causes, there we go, that's what happens when you get giant block text instead of nice calligraphy. So it also causes security issues. So we were like, okay, what can we do to overcome these so that we can still use this? And the actual implementation we got through pretty quickly. It was relatively easy. These were the 4 big things that for us were a challenge for our first implementation of Headless WordPress. So how do we overcome them? Well, the first one, seriously freaking me out right now. The first one we overcame just using tags, right? Really obvious solution. So we have a couple of tags, one for featured and one for homepage. So we just pull in the tags, which are already accessible through the API, to work out what's going to display on the homepage. I dread to think how this next one's going to show up. Yep. Well, at least it's split it on a sensible spot. So the issue of ACF. Turns out that if you Google how to fix this issue, the first thing that comes up is a plugin that a guy wrote. So it's actually the place that we found it, and where we found the most information about this is actually on the ACF support documents and in their forum. And the guy that wrote the plugin does keep it updated mainly on GitHub, but it is available in the repo. Basically, we used ACF for the banner images, one for a PNG, and I'll show you a screenshot of it in a minute, one for a PNG and one for a color selector for the banner. And by default, ACF wasn't shown in the API, but the plugin and I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, so sorry, but I feel like he needs a shout out because it's a great little plugin. It's by Eres Gonsalves. I apologize to anyone that's Spanish speaking. So it basically just exposes ACF endpoints to the WP REST API so that you can then use them for other stuff. So the CDN one is a little bit trickier because the first thing that we tried, we were like, well, we use key CDN for all of our WordPress sites. So why don't we just try that and see whether it then delivers the images through key CDN? But obviously that didn't work because that would have been way too easy. So we went back to the drawing board and we're like, all right, well, what else can we do? So the next easy thing to do, because it doesn't really matter what CDN it's being served from as long as it's being served from a CDN, was to just write a little bit of code, just a tiny script that switched the URL so that instead of being served from one place, it was being served from another. So we just changed the URL from the blog to the CDN URL. And like that worked, but we really weren't happy with it because we were like, well, we've come this far, right? So we're going to have to do the rest of it. Now, this is the bit where I'm going to really show that I'm not the technical brains behind this whole mission. My husband is. So I got him to text me exactly what he did. And I'm going to read it out for you right now because I know some of you are going to ask me technical questions that I don't know the answers to. So here we go. Ross's response on what we did with the CDN. We tried hosting the images and media for the blog on Key CDN. Turns out that using a caching plugin like WP Rocket and enabling the CDN feature doesn't change out the links in the content for the CDN. With the images, we're in the process of piping the content of the images through curl requests and using some htaccess trickery to make it seem like the images are hosted on the main website. The speed of this doesn't matter as the media on the main website is being cached by Cloudflare anyway, which is the ideal setup. So hopefully for the technical people in the audience who are like, yay, Headless WordPress, that's a technical talk. Hopefully you get something out of that. And the last thing was the security stuff. So what do we do about the security stuff? Oh wow, that's so terrible. So again, I got him to send me a little bit of a thing on that one. So we tried a couple of things with the security, but we were like, the easiest and obvious one is just to IP block the actual API, the access to the API. Because our biggest concern here with the security was that the API was going to get hit with DDoS attacks. So what we did is, with a couple of lines of code, we disabled external access to the API and limited it to only being accessible from the IP of the main web server of the website and localhost. So again, hopefully that makes sense to the more technical of you in the audience. And this is what the dashboard looks like. So you can see it's extremely bare. There's pretty much nothing there. So this is where I actually contributed it all to the project. Was I set them up on this. We did a couple of little custom blocks for them that they can use in there on the front end. So they've got a dashboard, some video tutorials. They've got access to posts, tags, categories, and media, and that's it. So it's a really simple little install. This is what it looks like on the home page, where we're using those tags. Oh man, tagged as home. And then this is what it looks like on the blog page. So this is that banner that's using the ACF fields. So we've got a custom field for where it says 6 silly mistakes furniture buyers make that cost them thousands. That's actually a PNG that's been uploaded as a custom field. And then the background banner is done using a color. And the reason that we did it that way was for responsiveness reasons, because if we had it just as a full-length banner, then obviously it looks a little bit wacky on mobile. So this was a nicer way for us to do it, to make it responsive. Just a neat little trick there. So the custom field for that one, and this is also tagged as featured, so that's how we work out what gets pulled in there. So that's pretty much it. I think the biggest takeaways for us from this project was that we thought the REST API was going to be really scary. We put off doing it for a long time because our two teams don't have a whole amount of crossover. His team doesn't work at all with WordPress, and my team only work with WordPress. So in the past, when we've needed to cross over, there's always been a little bit of blurriness there. So usually it ends up being iframes for when we do have crossover projects, and no one likes iframes. So for us, this has really opened up so many more options to be able to bring WordPress into other projects. So that's been, I think, the most exciting thing for us. But then also, like everything, even though it was easy to get it up and running in the first place, it was the little things that took a lot of time. So it was the things like the CDN, the security issues, working out how to deal with ACF. They were the ones that took us the most time there. But overall, I think, it was pretty easy. So hopefully that's inspired you guys to have a look at the API and maybe see what it can do. And maybe it's going to be a good solution for you, because I know that there's a lot of people out there who are thinking about static sites, and the headless API, like using the API to implement a headless static site is becoming a really popular trend. And it's actually something that we're now considering doing for some of my clients, which is really, really cool. So that's all, and I think I've got plenty of time for questions still. So hopefully they're not too technical, but Ross is awake, even though it's only like 6 o'clock in the morning in Perth. So, I will hand it over to you guys for questions.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, does anyone have questions?
Good morning. You said a lot, but if there's one thing I should remember about what you said and not to do, what should it be? Because I walk out trying to do all these other things and thinking I'm really good at this.
Is this all? Yeah, it is working. Brilliant. What should you do? Are you familiar with APIs? Have you used them before?
I'm just going to keep my hand down.
That's okay. Do you know PHP? Do you know JavaScript? Yeah? In that case, you can, if you know React or if you know JavaScript, you can work with APIs. So I would just go and have a look at the documentation and see what it can do, because it might inspire you to look into something else next time. It opens up more avenues, and I think that was the main thing I was trying to get across today is there's certain ways that headless is often implemented, and most of the talks that we've seen on it have been people implementing it for static sites or because they've wanted to decouple and do like a JavaScript front end. For us, I think the key takeaway was that you can use that API for so many different things. So just knowing what it's capable of means that you've got another thing in your toolkit to be able to go and attack whatever problem comes at you next time. So go and just have a look at the API documentation and see how powerful it is and what you can do with it.
Cool. Any more questions? What? Who was first? Okay, you're closest.
We'll get to you next.
Thanks for that. Do you have any, have you documented any of your stuff? Or is it available? Or will it be available?
We haven't yet, but what I can do, if you follow me on GitHub, I can get Ross to put up the code that he used for the IP blocking, which I think was one of the quirky little things that he did. In terms of the plugin that is on the repo, the ACF plugin, and other than that, I'm just trying to think like whether there was much else that really needed to be documented. But I'll have a talk to Ross, and if there's any other like valuable code, I'll whack that up on GitHub. Yes, I think the security thing was the main sort of code that we implemented from a WordPress perspective. Was just that IP blocking to only allow the API from external, not from external sources. Yeah, I think there was a lady up the back here.
Hello, thanks. Great talk.
Thank you.
Love your avatar. Where did you get it from?
Big plug for one of my good mates and our graphics designer of choice, Julie Belinge from the Brand Foundry. She does a lot of avatars, so she did both mine and Ross's, and she's done them for a lot of my customers as well. Yeah, it's called the Brand Foundry. Yeah. There was another one over here somewhere. This lady, I think.
Next question. Who was it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm actually loud enough that I don't need the microphone.
We'll get you to speak into the microphone anyway, just for the recording, because otherwise it doesn't go onto the live stream.
Yeah. Just a quick question with regards to what you were talking about with the, your case. But the same sort of thinking doesn't really apply with regards to social media integration into the headless. Because, I mean, there's plugins out there that just make that seamless through social media into a WordPress website. So if you've got someone who's a massive blogger, but through social media rather through WordPress or through website, and they want to start thinking about bringing that in, I'm assuming it's not going to be such a difficult implementation or transition because of the amount of plugins out there that just make that seamless.
Yeah, so I think fundamentally the two things are a little bit different in that with bringing stuff from like Facebook, for example, or another social media platform into WordPress versus what we were doing here. One of them, you're taking the data out of WordPress, so you're essentially using WordPress. You're doing it the other way around, so it's like you're using WordPress as your social media platform and then you're pulling that into something else. So that's what we were doing. And then what you're talking about doing is essentially all of those plugins are basically doing a similar kind of thing. They're using an API request to then pull that content from the social media platform into your website. And we've done that plenty of times before. So we do a lot of work with clients who are on the stock exchange. And with the stock exchange, they have lots of articles in magazines and that's publications like Directors Talk and stuff like that. So we often use their APIs or their RSS feeds to pull in that information into a WordPress website. So the issue there, I guess, is that each platform is different and has a different method of being able to pull in that information. So you probably want to find a plugin that does it all for you if you're coming from multiple platforms. And the other issue, I guess, that you run into, and something that I didn't really mention but probably should have, is that there is a certain amount of upkeep that's required in doing something like this over, using a plugin, like for what you're talking about, for example. You can code it yourself and you have full customization over what you do. But when you use a plugin, someone else has to make sure that that code keeps working, right? And so that's the issue that we now have to manage. We understand that there's technical overhead with making sure that that continues to work. So even just before I did this talk, before I took all the screenshots and everything, I was like, I better update everything first because I don't want to have that it's on the old version of WordPress. So I just photoshopped it out because as soon as we went up to WordPress 5.3, it broke it. And I was like, I don't have time to deal with the problem right now. So so I just rolled it back to 5.2.4 and was like, that is Ross's problem to deal with tomorrow. So hi Ross, I hope you're having fun with that. Yeah, so I think that for what you're talking about, probably a plugin is a better choice. But yeah, it is a similar concept. It's just kind of, I guess, the other way around.
Any more questions? No? Okay, I actually have a question.
Yay!
What did you use for the front end? Did you use the existing CMS that you mentioned, or did you build something new?
Yeah, so the website itself is custom built, but pulls heavily from the ERP system that runs in the back end. So it does run on PHP already. So it's not like heavily on JavaScript or anything, just because we're obviously, with any project that's been around for 15 years, you've got a little bit of legacy stuff that you've got to deal with. So that website changes regularly, but it's all 100% custom. So there's no specific CMS or anything on there. So we actually use PHP to pull in and modify a lot of to do the API and turn it into what we needed, because it was just what their team works with every day, and it was what they were familiar with. So yeah, with the CDN, it doesn't really slow anything down or make any difference. So it worked pretty well.
Cool. Okay, so if that's it for questions, then please thank Joe.